Viewer discretion advised. Extremely disturbing.
Close friends and family of the Harvey family had to plan mass funerals in lieu of a New Year's 2006 celebration. But even then, the horrors weren't over. Today, we'll talk about a horrifying string of crimes that took place during the week of 2006. Keep in mind that enemies may also enter through the doors you leave open for your friends. The perpetrators left a trail of total destruction, robbery, vicious attacks, and ruthless murder. The Harvey family was well known in Richmond. Two different families were deprived of life in their own homes in Virginia. These crimes were unlike anything the local authorities had seen before 8 people died. Kathy, a 39-year-old Catherine Elizabeth, was raised in King's Grant and was so well liked at school that she was crowned prom queen. When Kathy took a job as a waitress at a cafe, she had no idea that she would meet her destiny, a man called Brian Harvey, whom she would later marry. Kathy was an artistic person who found expressions of natural beauty in every detail. Raised on rock and roll, Brian had always been surrounded by music and dreamed of becoming a successful performer and guitarist. He formed a band called House of Freaks with his friends, and his creative potential matched Kathy's artistic nature. They fell in love right away, and by 1990, they were married and starting a new life together. The newlyweds lived in a 2-story house. Ray Brick House was a dream home for the young couple. But the most crucial thing in a family was missing kids. The beautiful Woodland Heights neighborhood of Richmond was known for its safety and was thought to be a good place to raise kids because there were so many schools nearby. Stella, a tiny princess, was born to the Harveys in 1996. Ruby, another baby girl, was born in 2001. The 2 daughters of Stella and Ruby were the focal point of the Harvey family's world. When his girls arrived, Brian, who was still active in music, stated in an interview that he understood his purpose in life. The Harvey family, consisting of 4 members, settled into their cozy home, and Brian became the leader of the household. On the weekends, Brian worked on computer maintenance for the local school district, but he made an effort to carve out a few hours for rehearsals. In order to establish a place where parents could come with their kids and spend time having fun, Kathy launched a toy store, which had always been her ambition. It was a great time. At Elemental Ray School, Stella was enrolled. The Harveys were a very active and gregarious family who kept their front door rarely locked so that neighbors and friends could come in whenever they wanted. Their home was open to everyone they loved and cared about. So if someone wanted to talk or ask for advice or didn't want to eat dinner alone, they would all go to the Harvey house. Ruby had just started kindergarten, and they wanted to spend all of their free hours and minutes together. The Harveys decided to celebrate New Year's with friends, family, and a bowl of their renowned chili on January 1st, 2006. In order to assist with the preparations for the New Year's party, Johnny Hott, the second member of the House of Freaks, and his daughter planned to arrive at their friend's house a little early. They arrived at 1:30 p.m., and from that very moment, a nightmare began in Richmond that would last for the entire next week. When Johnny and his daughter arrived at the Harvey house, smoke was streaming from the windows, and none of the 4 family members were in the area. The man became concerned that they might be trapped somewhere in the house and unable to leave, so he called 911 emergency services, pleading for someone to come right away. The firefighters expected to come across one of the usual scenarios involving electrical shorts or fire safety violations that they dealt with on a daily basis, but instead, they discovered the most horrifying crime scene that probably none of them had ever seen before. First responders who arrived at the scene were able to contain the spreading flames and proceeded directly to the basement of the house, where the fire had most likely started. 39 years old, Kathy 49 years old, Brian 9 years old, the 4-year-old, and Stella. Someone had killed every member of the Harvey family, then tried to burn down the house to remove any evidence. Ruby was discovered dead in the burned basement, bound with electrical cord and tape, and near their bodies were 2 hammers and a knife that were likely used in the attack on the family. Kathy's easel was overturned and covered in wine, judging by the empty bottles all over the floor. Nearby emergency personnel, rescue services, and friends were in complete shock in front of the house. How could this have happened to the Harvey family, whom everyone in the neighborhood loved, and who could have resorted to violence against even Stella and Ruby? The crime was so heinous that everyone who entered the house and witnessed the horrific scene left with pale faces and wide eyes. It took them a few minutes to gather their thoughts after witnessing the horrific scene. The investigation's complexity stemmed from the fact that there were no indications of forced entry. The house's windows and doors were all intact, and there were no indications of outside intrusion. This suggests that either the family trusted the individual and allowed them inside, or someone exploited the neighborhood's well-known open door policy. Either scenario was as terrifying. Numerous possible clues had already been destroyed by the fire, and anything else that may have assisted the police in solving this case had been swept away by the water used to put out the flames. Detectives started their investigation with little information and evidence, so they looked around the house, where there had been no damage from fire or water, in the hopes of finding a possible motive or possibly more leads. When they discovered that a number of items, including the couple's wedding rings, were missing, they began to wonder if this was a robbery or if there was a personal motive. Police preferred the initial account, but they were baffled by how a routine crime turned into the murder of 4 people, including Stella and Ruby, and why all Harvey family members had their autopsies done. Brian and Kathy died from blunt force trauma to the head, while Stella died from smoke inhalation and multiple head injuries. The following day, even the pathologist, who had seen a lot in his career, claimed he had never seen anything like this in his work. All 4 were beaten, sustained multiple wounds, and ultimately had their throats cut with a knife. Before they died, all 4 of them had to go through several horrifying moments. The authorities started questioning neighbors, relatives, and friends of the deceased family, but they all insisted that Brian and Kathy had no enemies or people who wished them dead. Nothing strange was happening in the house. No one was shouting or arguing, and no strange sounds came from the windows. Ruby died from knife wounds to her back that punctured one of her lungs. They weren't just sent to the other world. Just hours before the fire, a witness reported seeing Kathy and 9-year-old Stella. The previous evening, on New Year's morning at 10:30, Harvey's older daughter had spent the night at her friend's house, and her friend's mother, Kirsten Perkinson, had walked Stella home. Because Kirsten and Kathy were friends, the woman knocked on the door and waited for one of the owners to step out onto the porch so that Kirsten could personally give the girl to the owner. During their brief talk, the homeowner indicated that Kathy wasn't feeling well and then made a gesture with her hand as though she was holding a gun to her head and firing it at that same moment. Kathy appeared anxious and pale, as if something was amiss. Kirsten simply nodded and sympathized, taking this motion to be a sign of a really bad headache. Because she was accustomed to the Harvey house's doors always being open, Stella leaped inside and made her way directly to the basement, where one of the rooms resided. Her companion chased after her, but Kathy grasped the girl by the hand and nearly dragged her out the door. The homeowner clarified this by stating that she wasn't feeling well and that she wanted to take some time to sleep in peace. Kirsten thought this was a little odd and not like Kathy, but the woman had errands to run that morning and was going to be at the Harvey's party later, so she waved goodbye with a warm smile and forgot about it. The next minute, Kirsten was wondering if she had a chance to save the Harveys that day and if Kathy had given any signs that she might have missed. Based on Catherine's strange behavior, which Kirsten described, authorities determined that the perpetrator was already in the Harvey house by the time Stella returned from her sleepover. Given that the homeowners may have known their attacker, the only person who fell under suspicion was Johnny Hott, who had reported the fire at the Harvey residence to emergency services. This man was very close to Brian. They had even worked together for some time. They were also both members and founders of the band House of Freaks. Each of them had their own vision of what they played, and very often these views didn't align. At some point, the musicians burned out, and their paths regarding music diverged completely. The detectives initially decided to familiarize themselves with the music played by House of Freaks to better understand who the deceased and the suspect were. The police listened to the recordings and became somewhat concerned. The music sounded very dark, and although these were compositions of a specific genre, the song lyrics evoked complex associations. It turned out that Johnny Hott had written most of the lyrics. Several of them talked about problems with wives, about jealousy, even about basements, and all these things that somehow fit too conveniently into the crime time. And so investigators decided to interrogate Johnny. However, the conversation with Brian Harvey's music partner and friend destroyed their entire solid. The crime's Ray Johnny Hott was unrelated to it. However, after questioning everyone who knew the Harvey family, investigators discovered that they had dug too deep in their search for clues in musical compositions and had to go back to their list of possible suspects, even though there weren't many. There was nothing that authorities thought could have resulted in such a terrible crime, at least among those who knew the Harveys personally. So, the police started looking for other possible scenarios, now based on the likelihood that the perpetrator was probably not acquainted with the homeowners. This family had no business problems, no secret lovers, and they never argued with neighbors. Family and friends in Richmond lamented their tremendous, irreplaceable loss. The area in front of the Harvey house, and close to the tiny, charming toy business that was Kathy's lifetime goal, was filled with pictures of the departed, plush animals, flowers, and various memorial items. Richmond residents were confused and worried that whoever did this might carry out their vicious deed again, but their suspicions were almost immediately validated. A few days later, on January 6, 2006, while police were still looking into the unexplained death of an entire family, they received a call from Lillian Pauley of Chesterfield, Virginia. Chesterfield is a tiny community close to Richmond. Lillian was quite upset and told authorities that she could have known who was responsible for the murders of the Harvey family members. She also revealed to them that her daughter LaToya had a friend named Ashley Baskerville, who was 21 years old. Ashley arrived at Lily's house on January 1st, 2006, the day of the Harveys' deaths, with two men named Ricky Gray and Ray Dandridge who needed a place to stay. The homeowner put the tenants in a spare room, and they intended to stay there for the next week. However, soon after they moved in, her daughter LaToya approached her because she was worried that these men might be involved in the crime. News about the murder of 4 Harvey family members in Richmond was airing on all local TV channels, so everyone was discussing this crime. The odd thing was that the men had a laptop with them, which wasn't unusual in and of itself, especially since the strangers had someone else's laptop on the day of the crime. Some doubts surfaced right away. LaToya was afraid that Ray Dandridge and Ricky Gray might be the heartless murderers who committed the horrifying murder in Richmond, and that they were now residing in their home without anybody knowing. When the men left Lillian Pauly's home on January 6th, the woman felt secure enough to call the police and voice her suspicions. It's unclear how the authorities responded to this report because a few hours later, the station received another urgent call, this time from Lily's daughter, LaToya. In any case, the girl gave the dispatcher her friend's address and asked police to make sure everything was okay. A patrol car was on its way to the Baskerville-Tucker residence, which is about 15 miles from the Harvey house. The girl explained that she was worried about her friend Ashley Baskerville, and that when Ricky Gray and Ray Dandridge left their house, Ashley went with them. After that, contact with her friends stopped, and LaToya even expressed fear that she might be lying dead in her home. She couldn't explain why she had this thought, though. Ashley Baskerville lived in the home with her mother, Mary Baskerville Tucker, 46, and her stepfather, Percival Tucker, 55. The family was also well liked by everyone in the neighborhood. Percival was a forklift driver, and Mary was raising Ashley alone. Percival took both women under his wing and raised Ashley as his own daughter ever since friends said that Mary could make anyone laugh, which made her a pleasure to be around. On the other hand, Tucker was a quiet, considerate man, and he spent most of his free time playing guitar. He and Mary were active members of their local church, and by all accounts, they were a happy family. The 21-year-old, when authorities arrived at the Baskerville-Tucker home, they expected it to be another bloody crime in which all 3 family members, Percival, Mary, and Ashley, were bound, their throats cut, the head of the family was stabbed 5 times in the neck, and Mary twice. Their faces were wrapped in cellophane and bound with tape. Their house was completely ransacked, many items were missing, and even Percival's Chevrolet Blazer had vanished from the driveway. Ashley and her stepfather didn't always agree. The man was quite reserved and law-abiding, and the girl had a number of incidents involving prohibited substances and minor offenses, but aside from this, no one reason could be identified as the reason this family could become a target. A ring on a chain around Ashley Baskerville's neck was identical to one of the Harvey wedding rings that had been removed from their bodies after they passed away. Detectives first went to LaToya to find out why she was so certain that Ashley was at home and not alive. Officers felt that the girl had much more information than she had shared over the phone. The Harveys and Baskerville Tuckers didn't know each other. They lived in different cities and worked in completely unrelated fields. The only thing that connected the 2 families was the nature of their fatal injuries and that wedding ring. The perpetrator or perpetrators could easily attack another family. LaToya clarified that on New Year's Day, Ricky Gray and Ray Dandridge, 2 guys her friend Ashley had recently met, arrived at the house where LaToya resided with her mother and requested to rent a room for a few days. Ashley persuaded her companion that they simply needed a place to stay on January and that there wouldn't be any issues. LaToya Ray 6th, Ashley was in the room with the 2 men talking about ways to get money when the homeowner's daughter unintentionally joined the conspiracy, even though at first she didn't take it seriously. Ashley said that Percival, her stepfather, was extremely rigid and prevented her from living in peace with his regulations. The stepdaughter proposed that Ricky and Ray rob her stepfather because she knew he had amassed a significant fortune and stashed it someplace in the house. What transpired next was a discussion about the robbery plot. The criminals meant to LaToya listen to her friend and was horrified to hear that all three were seriously discussing how they would take Percival's savings, the man who had raised Ashley since she was a child, and stage a kidnapping using Ashley as bait in order to demand ransom from her parents. LaToya got up and left the room because she could not stand to hear this nonsense any longer, and she didn't want to be involved in a criminal scheme. LaToya spent the next 3 hours sitting nervously, waiting to see how it would all end after the renters and Ashley Baskerville left. Unfortunately, everything went quite differently than intended after the crime was meant to have occurred. Ashley wasn't with Ricky and Ray when they unexpectedly returned to retrieve their possessions. When the girl questioned where her buddy was, LaToya felt awful right once. The men told her that Ashley wanted too much money and that they had to say goodbye. As soon as the tenants left the room, LaToya frantically called the police station to beg them to check Ashley's house. Prior to that, she had informed her mother that based on witness testimonies and the Harvey wedding ring discovered around Ashley's neck, she had seen a laptop with pictures of the Harvey family in possession of the men who were renting a room in their house at this point. Ricky and Ray did not explicitly state that they had killed the girl. Rather, they claimed to have simply gotten rid of her. Detectives urged LaToya to phone Ray because, at that point, she was the only link to the possible offenders, and Chesterfield police knew exactly who they needed to find in order to solve both crimes. Nothing new was revealed to her by the men, who merely reiterated that they had bid Ashley farewell and would no longer have to worry about her. Detectives felt very secure knowing they now had actual suspects because Ray had given them clues throughout the chat that only the police and the criminals understood. Investigators were able to track the two men to Philadelphia thanks to their phone conversation. In particular, authorities released pictures of both suspects in the media, which prompted them to take immediate action to prevent the criminals from committing any more crimes while they were being sought. Detectives discovered another crime committed by Ray Dandridge and Ricky Gray. A few days ago, on January 3rd, an elderly man named Roy Mason called the police to say that two guys who had been in the news had broken into his house with a young woman who fit Ashley Baskerville's description. Threatening him and his wife, the men had sneaked into his house. The girl explored the rooms, stole electronics, cash, and anything else of material worth. Roy was with the elderly man, started pleading with them to spare his life so that someone would be there to care for his spouse, who was crippled and in need of his daily assistance and attention. It appears that Dandridge heeded this request and departed without doing any further harm to the pensioners. Ricky. Additionally, Ray and Ashley were intoxicated. Roy Mason was married to his wife. Ray was fortunate that the robbers only took money and jewelry and that their victims were not killed. The Chevrolet that was taken from Percival allowed Tucker police to swiftly pinpoint the exact location of the two individuals, which appalled Ray's victims' authorities about what else they might be involved in after they had effectively committed 3 crimes in a week. The car was observed parked close to Ray's father's home in Philadelphia. On January 7th, 2006, a SWH team surrounded Ray's father's house. Ray Dandridge was stopped while attempting to flee through the back door, and the man surrendered without any opposition. However, Ricky Gray wasn't planning to do the same, and the officers had to search the entire house before they discovered him hiding behind a water heater in the basement. According to the authorities, Gray had a completely insane expression, as if he would rather die than turn himself in to the police. But after a brief altercation, police were able to apprehend him, and both men were taken into custody within an hour. Ray Dandridge confessed to the murder of the Baskerville Tucker family, and it didn't take any time or effort. The man claimed he took part in the attack, but Ricky was the mastermind behind it all, and he simply obeyed orders. Since police lacked tangible proof linking these men to the Richmond crime, detectives sought to get a confession regarding the assault and murder of the Harvey family. Both men were charged with the murders of Percival Tucker Mary and Ashley Baskerville. After talking to a detective, Ricky Gray sat in his cell and wrote a 3-page letter confessing to all of his crimes. These confessions showed what an abnormal life these people had led. They showed no remorse for their actions, no motive, just an insatiable thirst for power over defenseless people. In the end, Ray Dandridge testified and reported that the Harvey family was also responsible for this period. In fact, Ricky, who was thought to be the catalyst for everything, was Ray's uncle. The two men were born in 1977, so they grew up together like brothers. Ricky's family life couldn't be considered successful because he was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which led to him getting into trouble at school. His father used corporal punishment against him, and his stepbrother subjected him to physical violence, alcohol prohibition, and molestation throughout his childhood. These factors formed the basis of Ricky's entire life, and as he grew older, he didn't change anything, but instead continued to live in the same chaos. The man wasn't afraid that justice would eventually catch up with him because he was already drinking heavily and committing a lot of petty crimes. During this time, Ray was by his side, and he was having a low level of intelligence. The young man clung to Ricky, who never passed judgment, but only involved him in his dubious activities because he was unable to adjust to society and had no one to support him. The teenagers became inseparable and committed a number of minor crimes together in 1995, when they were both 18 years old. They were sentenced to 10 years in prison for a string of robberies in Northern Virginia, but after their time apart, they were drawn back to one another as if by a magnet, and their crimes continued. Ricky and Ray were released from prison just months before the mass crimes in Richmond and Chesterfield, making it impossible for them to even acclimate to life in normal society. Early on January 1st, 2006, the men decided they needed to get some money, so they went to Richmond at random with the intention of surveying the city and committing a robbery. Shortly before 9 in the morning, Ricky and Ray discovered that the front door of the Harvey house was unlocked. The open door policy made the Harvey family a prime target because they wanted to help others and offered to enter their home at any time. So Brian and Kathy put themselves and their own daughters in danger. Brian Harvey, Kathy, and tiny Ruby just sat silently below and waited for the criminals to depart, after Ricky and Ray stormed into the house and ordered the entire family into the basement where they were bound. The guys assured the family that everything would be okay if they followed their instructions. While Ray explored the entire house for valuables, Ricky kept watch over the family in the basement. The criminals had been there for a few hours when Kirsten Perkinson knocked on the door at 10:30 to say she was taking 9-year-old Stella home after a sleepover. Absolute anarchy started at this point. The criminals ordered Kathy to go upstairs to retrieve her daughter. The woman was told that if she tried to call for help, all of her loved ones would perish. Kathy tried to keep a straight face so that she wouldn't show her distress, and put her husband and little Ruby in danger. The entire time Kathy was upstairs talking to Kirsten, a knife was pointed at her back. In fact, Mrs. Harvey saved Kirsten's little daughter's life when she routinely attempted to follow Stella to the basement. This situation drove Ricky to the extreme, presumably out of fear of being caught. His eyes were filled with blood, and he snapped, starting to stab everyone in the family. When the attack ended and he came to, he was furious and was even more horrified by what he had done. When all the Harvey family members were dead, the men trying to demolish the crime scene set Kathy's easel on fire and broke wine bottles in the basement to speed up the spread of the flames. When they hurried out of the house, no one saw them. Stella and Ruby were still alive, but Ricky, unable to control his emotions again, rushed to deliver more strikes. Ashley Baskerville, who was waiting for Ricky and Ray to return, was sitting in a neighboring car at the time. She understood why her friends had entered the house, but she exhibited no pity at all. By January 8th, police were able to confirm that Ashley was not only a victim of the series of attacks, but was also involved in them. The police already had confessions from both of the perpetrators who killed 2 entire families, so they wondered if these were the only serious crimes in Gray and Dree's lives. It turned out that Ricky Gray had gotten married after being released from prison, and about a month before New Year's, he had severely beaten his wife, Trevor, until her body was found in a shallow grave in the Pittsburgh suburbs. Because of the woman's, to put it mildly, a poor reputation, police were reluctant to investigate her death, attributing it to a commonplace because no one even suspected her husband, except the deceased's parents, who were aware of the frequent arguments between the spouses. Ultimately, the case of Trevor Gray's death was only reopened after Ricky's confession in 2006. After being released from prison, Ricky moved into Trevor's family home. Her parents were concerned about their daughter's safety because of their son-in-law's criminal history, but she was adamant about keeping their relationship going because she thought that prison had changed him and that she was mistaken. Gray's hostility, which had been temporarily suppressed by the correctional facility, emerged with full force after he was released. Ricky found employment and made an effort to fit in with the law, but he wasn't very successful. When his nephew Ray Dandridge was finally released from prison on October 26, 2005, he also moved into Trevor's home. However, nothing positive ever happened between the two of them. It wasn't until 6 months into their marriage that Trevor realized Ricky wasn't who he claimed to be. She went to her parents upset, saying she had made a mistake about him and wanted to end the marriage. A few days later, she vanished because no investigation into Trevor's death was done. The distraught parents evicted both men from the house, and the former husband and his nephew left to live in Virginia, where they continued their string of crimes until Dandridge later admitted that he held Trevor while Gray beat her with a metal pipe. Ricky Gray said that on December 31, 2005, he and Ray attacked the automobile of 26-year-old Ryan in Warrington. The attack almost resulted in death. The man was stabbed several times in the chest in front of his parents' house. He spent 2 weeks in a coma and was never able to use his right arm again. The attackers only wanted his wallet and keys. This case likewise broke its impasse, but the investigation led nowhere. Only after Ricky Gray's confession, the men met Ashley in one of the bars on New Year's Eve after they decided to stage her kidnapping to extract money from her stepfather. The entire scheme fell apart. Gray and Dandridge burst into the Tucker Baskerville house, using the keys the girl had given them. Then, they bound Ashley, Mary, and Perciel and stuffed gags into each of their mouths. At some point, the criminals decided to alter the plan, taking the lives of Ashley's parents right before her eyes, after which the same fate awaited her. According to Ricky, he grew tired of the girl and simply disposed of her. His girlfriend hardly expected such an ending to a chance encounter. Apparently, these two derived pleasure from the crimes themselves. They committed them for the sake of profit. In one New Year's week Gray and Dandridge sent 7 people to their grave. They robbed 2 people and beat one nearly to death when authorities began investigating the Harvey case. They couldn't have imagined they would stumble upon the trail of such ruthless criminals. Ray Dandridge entered a guilty plea and received a life sentence. Ricky Gray withdrew his confessions and was given the death penalty on October 23, 2006. The death of 9-year-old Stella and 4-year-old Ruby at his hands was the deciding factor in the verdict. The execution was repeatedly delayed until it reached the Supreme Court, which was willing to hear arguments from lawyers regarding the defendant's traumatic upbringing and decided that the punishment for his crimes was appropriate. On January 18, 2017, 39-year-old Ricky Gray's sentence was carried out. He effectively became one of the last criminals executed in Virginia prior to the repeal of the death penalty in 2021. The Harvey family was posthumously named Richmond's Family of the Year in 2006. And that's where we'll leave this case for now. What do you think? Was justice served, or is there more to the story? Let me know in the comments. If you found this case interesting, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more true crime content. Until next time, stay safe and stay curious.